The town laughed when Nathan Cole built a cabin inside a cave. Not near a cave. Not beside a cave. Inside one. By the time winter arrived, half the valley had nicknamed him the Mole. Nathan didn't mind. People often laughed at things they didn't understand. The trouble began the year before. A spring flood destroyed his family farm. The river overflowed after weeks of heavy rain, tearing through fields, barns, and homes alike. Most families rebuilt. Nathan tried. For nearly a year, he poured every spare dollar into repairs. Then another disaster struck. A summer drought ruined what little remained. Debt followed quickly. At 34 years old, Nathan found himself with a choice. Spend years struggling to save a dying farm, or start over somewhere new. He chose the mountains. Most people considered the decision foolish. Mountain winters were brutal. The terrain was difficult. Good farmland barely existed. Yet Nathan wasn't looking for farmland. He was looking for security. Something the river couldn't wash away. Something the wind couldn't tear apart. Something strong enough to survive whatever nature decided next. 3 weeks into his search, he found it. The cave sat halfway up a mountainside overlooking the valley. From below, it looked unimpressive. A simple rock overhang carved into a cliff face. Most travelers wouldn't notice it. Nathan almost didn't. Then he stepped inside. The difference surprised him immediately. Outside, cold autumn wind swept through the mountains. Inside, the air felt calm. Stable. Protected. The cave stretched nearly 80 feet into the mountainside. Its ceiling rose high overhead. The floor remained dry. Most importantly, the opening faced south. Winter sunlight would reach deep inside. Snow and wind would not. Nathan stood there for nearly an hour. The more he looked, the more possibilities appeared. By sunset, he had made his decision. The cave would become home. Construction began the following week. Nathan built carefully. The cabin sat well inside the cave rather than at the entrance. This allowed the mountain itself to serve as protection. The roof required less material because the cave covered most of it. The walls remained sheltered from weather. Strong winds never reached the structure. Every design choice served one purpose: survival. Travelers passing through the mountains frequently stopped to watch. Most reacted exactly the same way: confusion, then amusement. One hunter eventually asked the question everyone seemed to have: why build a cabin inside a cave? Nathan smiled. Why build one outside? The hunter laughed, then shook his head. Normal people don't do this. That's probably true. Word spread quickly. Mountain communities rarely enjoyed entertainment. A man building a house inside a cave certainly qualified. People came from neighboring settlements simply to see it. Some admired the craftsmanship. Most laughed. The nickname appeared soon afterward: the Mole. Nathan accepted it without complaint. Because every week the project improved. The cabin gradually took shape. Solid log walls. A sturdy stone chimney. Storage sheds built into natural recesses. A workshop. A woodshed. Everything protected beneath the cave's ceiling. By late autumn, the place looked remarkable. Not luxurious. Practical. Efficient. Permanent. Then came the first storm. A strong mountain storm rolled through during early November. Heavy winds battered the region. Several cabins lost shingles. Trees fell across roads. Fence lines disappeared. Nathan watched everything from his front porch, which sat entirely beneath solid rock. The cave blocked the wind almost completely. Snow fell outside. The cabin remained dry. The storm raged all night. The next morning, Nathan walked through the valley. Damage appeared everywhere. Yet his cabin looked exactly as it had the day before. Untouched. That was when people stopped laughing quite so loudly. Curiosity began replacing mockery. One afternoon, an elderly trapper named Eli Turner visited. At 78 years old, Eli knew more about surviving winter than anyone else in the mountains. He spent nearly an hour studying the cave, examining the entrance, inspecting the cabin, observing airflow. Finally, he nodded. Interesting. Nathan laughed. That's a polite way of saying strange. Eli smiled. Strange isn't always wrong. The old trapper stepped outside and looked across the valley. Snow covered distant peaks. Dark clouds lingered along the horizon. Then his expression changed. The smile vanished. What is it? Nathan asked. Eli remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he pointed toward the highest mountains. You see those clouds? Nathan nodded. They're building early. So? The old trapper frowned. So they shouldn't be. Nathan looked again. The clouds seemed ordinary enough. Yet something about Eli's tone felt unsettling. The old man had survived nearly 60 winters in these mountains. People listened when he worried. Eli looked back toward the cave, then toward the cabin protected beneath it. Finally he nodded. Good place. Nathan smiled. I think so. The trapper slowly shook his head. You don't understand. His voice dropped. When the mountains decide to punish people. He pointed toward the cave ceiling. This may be the safest home in the valley. The words lingered long after Eli left, especially because the old trapper sounded genuinely concerned. Over the following weeks, more warnings appeared. Hunters reported unusual snowfall in higher elevations. Animal migrations started early. Temperatures dropped faster than expected. Even longtime residents grew uneasy. The mountains were changing. Something felt wrong. By early December, everyone prepared for a difficult winter. No one expected what came next. The storm arrived during the night. At first it seemed ordinary. Snow, wind, cold, nothing unusual. Then the snowfall intensified. By sunrise, roads disappeared. By evening, drifts reached several feet high. The storm continued through the night. And the next day, and the next. People stopped calling it a snowstorm. They started calling it an event. Because nobody could remember seeing anything like it. Meanwhile, Nathan sat beneath the cave overhang, watching snow pile across the valley. The mountain shielded his cabin completely. Wind swept past the opening, never reaching the house. Snow accumulated outside. Barely any entered the cave. Everything functioned exactly as planned. Then the third day arrived, and with it came a realization. The storm wasn't weakening. It was getting stronger, far stronger. Nathan stood at the edge of the cave, looking toward the valley below. Most buildings had disappeared beneath snow. Only rooftops remained visible. The town itself seemed to be sinking into the storm. And as darkness fell on the third night, Nathan began to wonder whether Eli Turner had been right. Because before this blizzard ended, the entire valley was about to discover the difference between surviving winter and hiding from it. On the fourth day, the town disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Nathan stood at the edge of the cave and stared into a world made entirely of white. The road leading through the valley had vanished. Fences no longer existed. Barns resembled small bumps beneath enormous drifts. Only a handful of rooftops remained visible. Even those looked temporary. The blizzard continued relentlessly. Snow fell day and night. Wind screamed across the mountains. The valley had become a frozen ocean. Yet inside the cave, life remained remarkably normal. Nathan's cabin sat untouched beneath the stone overhang. The roof stayed clear. The woodshed remained accessible. The workshop stayed dry. The mountain absorbed the worst of the storm. Every decision he made months earlier suddenly looked wiser than he ever imagined. That evening, while splitting firewood near the cave entrance, Nathan noticed movement. At first he assumed it was blowing snow. Then he saw it again. Dark shapes struggling through the storm. People. Several people. Moving slowly. Fighting every step. Nathan grabbed a lantern immediately. The figures gradually emerged from the white chaos. 3 adults. 2 children. All exhausted. All half buried in snow. The leader was Mayor Thomas Harding. The same mayor who once laughed hardest at the cave cabin. The man looked nearly defeated. When he finally reached the cave entrance, he removed his hat. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Then he looked around. At the protected cabin. At the dry ground beneath the overhang. At the stacks of firewood untouched by snow. Disbelief filled his face. You were right. Nathan smiled faintly. About what? The mayor laughed bitterly. Everything. Nathan stepped aside. Come inside. The family entered quickly. The children immediately stopped shivering. Warmth from the stove filled the cabin. The contrast felt unbelievable. Outside, the storm seemed determined to bury the world. Inside, life continued comfortably. The mayor sat quietly for several minutes. Then he shook his head. I thought this place was ridiculous. Nathan chuckled. So did most people. The mayor looked toward the cave's ceiling. Solid stone stretching overhead, protecting everything beneath it. Not anymore. That night more people arrived. Then more. Word spread quickly. The cave cabin remained accessible. Safe. Protected. The mountain itself shielded it from the storm. Families began making the difficult journey. One by one they climbed toward the cave, seeking shelter, seeking survival. Nathan welcomed everyone. The cave had space. The mountain had room. By the 5th day, nearly 40 people occupied the refuge. Children slept in storage rooms. Families shared supplies. Neighbors who barely spoke before the storm now worked together. The cave became a small village. A village hidden inside a mountain. Then the snowfall finally stopped. But the danger remained. The valley lay buried beneath extraordinary amounts of snow. Several roofs had collapsed. Many homes became inaccessible. Travel remained impossible. The storm ended. The consequences did not. The following morning, Nathan joined several volunteers exploring the valley. The sight shocked everyone. Snow covered entire buildings. Some cabins disappeared completely. Barns looked like hills. Roads ceased to exist. The town had effectively been buried. Yet one structure remained almost exactly as before. Nathan's cave cabin. The mountain overhang prevented accumulation. The wind swept past rather than into the shelter. Nature itself seemed to protect the site. As rescue efforts continued, the cave became even more important. Food storage remained accessible. Firewood remained dry. People gathered there to organize recovery efforts. What started as a strange experiment had become the center of survival for the entire valley. One evening, after another exhausting day, Nathan sat beside the stove when a familiar voice spoke. "You picked the right mountain." Nathan looked up. Eli Turner stood in the doorway. The old trapper smiled. "I was wondering if you'd show up." Eli laughed. "Takes more than a blizzard to get rid of me." The old man walked outside and studied the cave once more. Snow covered the landscape below. The valley still looked frozen in time. Then he nodded slowly. "I've spent 60 years studying these mountains." Nathan waited, and Eli pointed toward the overhang. "That cave wasn't an accident." Nathan frowned. "What do you mean?" "The mountain created a shelter." The old trapper ran a hand across the stone wall. "Most people saw a hole in a cliff." He smiled. "You saw a home." Weeks passed. Gradually the valley recovered. Roads reopened. Roofs were repaired. Life resumed. But nobody forgot the blizzard. Especially the part about the cave cabin. Visitors arrived constantly. Builders. Homesteaders. Travelers. Everyone wanted to see the place that survived the 5-day storm untouched. Many couldn't believe it. Photographs barely captured the reality. The cabin sat beneath its rocky shelter exactly as before. No damaged roof. No collapsed walls. No buried doorway. Just a warm cabin protected by a mountain. By spring, people spoke differently about Nathan. The nickname "the Mole" disappeared. In its place came something else. Respect. One afternoon, months later, Mayor Harding climbed to the cave carrying a small wooden plaque. Nathan met him near the porch. The mayor handed it over. "What is this?" "A thank you." Nathan examined the carving. The words were simple. "The cabin that saved the valley." He laughed. "That's a bit dramatic." The mayor shook his head. "No." His eyes moved toward the valley below, then back to the cave. When the entire town disappeared beneath snow, he pointed toward the shelter. This was the only place everyone knew would still be here. After the mayor left, Nathan sat on his porch watching the evening sunlight illuminate the mountains. The same mountains that created the cave. The same mountains that buried the town. The same mountains that tested every home. Below him, the valley slowly returned to life. Above him, solid stones stretched across the sky. The shelter everyone mocked. The shelter that survived. The shelter that proved him right. And as the last light faded across the peaks, Nathan smiled. Because when the worst blizzard in living memory finally arrived, it wasn't the strongest house that saved him. It was choosing the right place to build it.